Okay, so we're talking about factoring trinomials when a is 1. So now we're going to talk about factoring trinomials when a is greater than 1. A always has to be greater than 1. If a is negative, then you're going to have to factor out a negative. So we're going to work backwards. You guys know when you have a binomial times a binomial, you can either use FOIL or you can use the box method to figure out the answer to this. I like FOIL. 6x squared plus 2x plus 15x plus 1. I have like terms, so I'm going to add those. 6x squared plus 17x plus 1. So this is your trinomial, and this is what it looks like factored. If you're given a trinomial and a is greater than 1, always look to see if you can factor out a greatest common factor first. If you can factor out a greatest common factor, do that, and then factor what's left. What's left will be a trinomial probably. Okay, so after you factored out your greatest common factor, if there is one, multiply a times c. So a is your coefficient of your x squared, and c is your constant. And you want to find all the factors of the product AC whose sum is b. These factors will be your m and your m. Once your sum of the sum equals this, you know what your m and your n are, rewrite it this long way. Ax squared plus mx plus nx plus c. Then group the terms with common factors. So like you'd group them like this, or you'd move them around if you need to. Then you factor out the greatest common factor from each group. And when you have the same, two of them that are same, you can rewrite that as a binomial. So looks totally confusing until we get to practice it. I mentioned this one on the first slide. A must be positive. If it's not positive, factor out a negative greatest common factor. Ugh, I hate it when I invert that. Greatest common factor. If there is no greatest common factor, you need to factor out a -1 to flip the signs of everything inside. Then continue on with your steps 2 through 7. If you have tried the steps 1 through 7 and you cannot factor it, it could be a prime polynomial and write prime as the answer. But you have to try all the factors first before you quit. Okay, step 1, greatest common factor. I guess step 1 is checking to make sure A is positive. A is positive. Now I'm looking at 7, 20, 2, and 3. You do not have a greatest common factor. So now I'm ready for my t-chart. My t-chart, my first column is my product, P-R-O-D-U-C-T, 7 times 3, which is 21, A times C. And their sum needs to be B, which is a positive 22. I'm dealing with all positives so that I know my M and my N are going to be positives. So let's see here. Product of 21 whose sum is 22. I could do 7 and 3, add those together to be 10. I'm sure you guys already know what it is, but that's kind of going to give you, like, try a few different ones. 21 is also 21 times 1. 21 plus 1 is 22. I know my M and my N. Okay, once you figure out the sum and the products, so there's my M and my N. Okay, so now you're going to rewrite this trinomial spreading apart your M and your N. So your first term stays exactly the same. Your middle term is going to be your mx, or whatever variable that is, plus your nx, or whatever variable that is. Your third term stays exactly the same. Now we're going to group the first two and the last two. You might have to change your M and your N around if it doesn't have a greatest common factor. But this one does. I know my greatest common factor is 7x. 7x squared divided by 7x is x, plus 21x divided by 7x. I'm dividing both those by the greatest common factor. 21x divided by 7x is 3, plus the greatest common factor here is simply a 1. So I'm going to put my 1 on the outside, x plus 3. Now I see in my parentheses, this is written twice. That's what it means by 2 for 1. It's written twice, but now you're going to write it once. What's on the outside, we're also going to write. So that is my binomial that if I multiplied it, I should get this. So I'm going to check it. I use FOIL. First, outer, inner, last. 7x squared plus 22x plus 3. It checks, so I know this one's right. And it doesn't matter the order that you write it. You could also write it like this. Oops. You have to get the numbers right, though. And it is exactly the same thing. When I multiply it, I get the same answer. Okay? So they are equivalent. They are the same thing. Okay, you hit pause and try to do this one on your own. Did you get 2x minus 7 times 5x minus 4? Or, of course, you can have 5x minus 4 first and then 2x minus 7 second. It's the same exact thing. Did you get that? If you did, terrific. Move on to the next slide. If you did not, let's go over what you need to do. So you need to create a T-chart where you have the products of 28 times 10, which is 280, whose sum is negative 43. I have to multiply them together and get a positive. However, when I add them, I have to get a negative, so I know they're going to be both negatives. So I'm going to start with negative 2 times negative 140, which is negative 143, which obviously is not what I'm looking for, so I'm going to go even further. Let's see here, 8, 9, 10, that's not divisible by 3, it is divisible by 4. Negative 4 times negative 70, which is negative 74. It is divisible by 5, so negative 5 times negative 56, which when you add it together is negative 61. Is it divisible by 6? Yep. Negative 6. Let's see here. 6 goes into 28 4 times. It's 40. Oh, no, that's not it. Nope, it's not divisible by 6. Is it divisible by 7? Yes, it is. So I remember I have to have negative numbers. So negative 7 times negative 40, which is negative 47. I'm getting closer. What about 8? So I'm going to divide it by negative 8. 8 times 3 is 24. 45, negative 35. Negative 35 plus 8 is negative 43. Hey, I found it. So you just keep going until you find it. Once you found it, rewrite it. 10x squared minus 8x minus 35x plus 28. So I have to remember these are both negatives. I'm going to do add the opposite here because I'm going to group these two and then I'm going to group these two. Okay, looking just at these two, what is my common denominator? Greatest common denominator is 2x. So I'm going to divide both by 2x and I get 5x minus 4 plus, okay, I see this has a plus sign in here. I want a negative sign, so I'm going to take out a negative. Let's see here, 7. So I'm going to divide both of these by negative 7. Negative 35 divided by negative 7 is a 5x. 28 divided by 7 is 4, negative 4. Okay, so I have the same binomial for each of them, which is terrific because I remind myself 2 for 1. And then what's left over gets into a binomial in parentheses by itself, and I'm going to do plus negative as a minus sign. Okay, now I'm going to check it. 10x squared minus 8x minus 35x plus 28. 10x squared minus 43x plus 28, and I look back up here, that's what I started with, so I know this is my correct answer. So hopefully you're able to follow along and figure out where you went wrong. Hit pause and you try to do this one. Did you get 3 times the quantity x plus 5 times the quantity x plus 3? If you did, you can move on. If you did not, let's figure out what you need to do. Okay, step 1 is always to look at your numbers and try and factor out a greatest common factor, which this one has one. 3 goes into all of these numbers, so we're going to put a 3 on the outside, and we're left with what we get after we divide each term by 3. X squared plus 8x plus 15. Okay, this is an A of 1, so a product of 15 whose sum is 8, 5, and 3. So I don't need to spread it apart because I know it's going to be x plus 5 times x plus 3 because that's how we did it yesterday. Or the other day, the last one we did. And of course, always checking it. Foil it first. And that's what I started with, so I know I'm correct. Okay, this one says to solve. So we remember in order to solve, we first have to factor, then we set each factor equal to 0. So you try this on your own, hit play when you're done. Did you get a equals 1.5 or a equals -3/4? If that is what you got, then you may move on to the next slide. If not, let's figure out what's going on. Okay, so the first thing you have to do is get everything on the same side and set it equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. I'm going to add 3a to both sides. 8a squared minus 6a minus 9 equals 0. Okay, now I have it all set equal to 0. I need to look for a greatest common factor. 8, 6, and 9 do not share a greatest common factor, so now I'm ready for my t-chart. -8 times 9 is -72. Their sum has to be -6. So because this is a negative, one has to be positive, one has to be negative. And because their sum is a negative, I know the larger number is my negative. So I'm going to start with, well, I'm not going to do 8 times -9 because I know that's -3, which is not what I'm looking for. So I'm going to try 2 and -36, which is -34. Then let's see here. 7, 8, 9 is divisible by 3. So 3 and -26, which is -23. Still 2, not the right number. I'm going to try 4 and -18, which is -14. Still not the right number. Not divisible by 5. It is divisible by 6. So 6 and -12, which is -6. That's the one I'm looking for. So my first term stays exactly the same. My second term, this is my m, this is my n. I'm going to group those and pull out their greatest common factor of each binomial. So that's 2a. So I'm going to divide that by 2a and that by 2a. 2a parentheses 4a plus 3 plus, let's see here, I want to pull out a negative number, -3. So I'm going to divide those both by -3. -12 divided by -3 is a positive 4a plus 3 equals 0. Okay, good. What I have in parentheses is the same for both of them. So that means I'm on the right track. 2a minus 3 times 4a plus 3 equals 0. Now I'm factored. I need to set them each equal to 0. and solve. Okay, in order for it to equal to 0, you would either need a to be equal to negative 3/4 or a equal to 1 1/2. Why don't you hit pause and try to see if you can solve this on your own. Hit pause. Did you get the width is 5 miles? If you did, you can move on to the next slide. If you didn't, let's see what we need to do. Okay, so how wide is the reserve? Let's see here. The width is what I know the least about, so I'm going to set my variable equal to the width. I'm going to draw my picture. That's my width. The length is 1 mile longer, so +1, then twice the width. So twice the width plus 1 is my length. Area is 55 square miles, so I need to multiply my length times my width and set it equal to the area. Okay, so there is my equation. I need to distribute 2w squared plus w equals 55. I'm going to have to solve this, so I now have to factor first and then set them equal to 0. So 2w squared plus w minus 55 equals 0. I cannot factor anything out, so I'm going to have negative 55 times 2, which is negative 110, and I want that to multiply together to be positive 1. So one of them is going to have to be negative and one's going to be positive, and I know my larger one's going to be positive because when I add them together it's positive. So I know 10 and 11. 10 times 11 is 110. If I subtract them, I get 1. So which one's going to be negative? My bigger one is going to be positive, so my smaller one's going to be negative. Okay. Okay, I know my m and I know my n. So I'm going to put them in place of my middle m. 2w squared minus 10w plus 11w minus 55 equals 0. I'm going to factor those, and I'm going to factor those. All right, let's see here. I'm going to factor out a 2w here. So I'm going to divide both by 2w. I'm left with w minus 5 plus, I'm going to factor out an 11. I'm left with w minus 5 equals 0. Cool, that's what we need. So 2w plus 1 plus 11 in parentheses, and then w minus 5 in parentheses, all of that said equal to 0. So now I've factored it. I'm ready to go to my next step, which is solving it. So to solve it, I have to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So I have w equals 5. Width of 5 makes sense. Oh, I can see right now this one's not going to make sense. You cannot have a negative width. So I know I have a single answer. The width is 5 miles. Length and width do not get squared. It's the area that gets squared units. And that is the end of the section.